Point Park Track and Field competed in the NAIA National Championships. We interviewed Damir Steven Stewart about nationals. Point Park baseball and softball are ready for this season to start. The Penguins had a couple of games this past week, and what are the Steelers looking for in the upcoming draft class? Big names in the NFL being moved. The Stanley Cup gets an updated logo, and March Madness is almost here. It's time to come on down to the Pioneer Sideline. Hello and welcome to Pioneer Sideline. I'm Natalia Hillen. Sophie Jabose, Emma Pavlik, Collins Easy, and Damir Steven Stewart all competed for the first time in the NAIA Nationals at Dakota State University in Brookings, South Dakota. This past week, junior Sophie Jabose competed in the triple jump and took 27th place in the nation with a jump of 10.35 meters. Freshman Emma Pavlik competed in the women's high jump and was the national runner-up out of 14 qualifying athletes. Pavlik got a personal record and broke her own school record with 1.71 meters. She also earned the NAIA All-American honors. Sophomore Collins Easy competed in the triple jump and placed 21st in the nation with a jump of 13.91 meters. Going into the meet on Saturday, Easy was placed at 32nd and moved up 9 places. And sophomore Damir Steven Stewart competed in the long jump and 60-meter dash. Today, I am joined by Damir to walk us through his nationals experience. Damir, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Natalia.
First off, congratulations on making it to nationals. And I know you competed in the long jump and 60 meters. How did you do in each event?
Thank you, and I think I did pretty okay. It wasn't my best performances of the season, but I still went out there and competed and had solid performances.
It's still such an accomplishment. And I know nationals is kind of different than any other meet that you've competed in. How did you prepare for it?
To prepare, we just went over the little things like our technique, going out the blocks, making sure our landings were good for jumps, things like that, and also making sure we were well rested because we had conferences not too long before that, so we were all just a little bit worn out.
Yeah, was it tough going from conferences to nationals like within a week?
It was pretty challenging, but I think that the coaches really helped us prepare and made sure that we were taking the right steps to be at our best.
Mm-hmm. What was it like competing in your first ever college nationals?
It was really fun. I really got to see a lot of great performances, a lot of great athletes, and I really thought I stacked up well against the competition.
Yeah, with that competition, what was the most challenging thing that you had to go through, and how did you overcome that?
I just had to get over that mental block that I wasn't good enough to go against those athletes because I had the qualifying marks and everything, so I knew that I belonged in that type of atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. So in the prelims and the 60 meters, how did you feel in that exact moment, right before the race?
As soon as we finished the race, I thought I had won. I thought I was in a good place, but I finished around 5th in my heat. It was a really close race. Top 5 were all within a 1/10 of a second.
Wow. What are you looking forward to most this upcoming spring for outdoor?
I'm really looking forward to dropping some times, really looking forward to get back to nationals and trying to get back to that national stage and just hopefully bring home All-American this outdoor season.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations again. Thank you so much for coming on, and good luck competing this spring.
Thank you.
The Pioneers will be competing in their first outdoor meet on Friday, March 18th in the Stan Romanski Open at the WVU Milan Park. Coming up after the break, we're going to send things over to Hannah Bazet to update us on how the softball and baseball teams did over spring break.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, and welcome back to Newsnight. Most of the student body of the Pittsburgh Public Schools.
Some of the United States allies.
Thursday, the FBI was seen raiding.
Let's get started with today's forecast.
Today's high will only reach about 31 degrees.
It's looking a little cooler than we've seen in the past few weeks.
All this and more.
All this and more
All this and more coming up on Newsnight.
coming up on Newsnight.
Coming up on Newsnight.
Point Park baseball and softball had a few games over spring break. And to give us a recap on the games, we send things over to Hannah Bazet. Hannah?
Thanks, Nat. The men's baseball team traveled to Kentucky this past weekend to face Brescia University. Both games were huge blowouts for the Pioneers as they got control early and maintained it for the rest of both games. To start the game, the Pioneers were up 1-0 and then came up huge in the 6th inning, getting 6 runs. Gordon Campbell had a grand slam, which was his second in a span of 3 games. Ed Pfluger and Luis Hernandez both got a 2-run homer in the 9th inning. Brescia University didn't score anything until the 6th inning and didn't manage to make anything happen for the rest of the game. The Pioneers baseball team finished the game with a score of 10-3. In the second game, the Pioneers came up big again, with it taking them only 7 innings to put up 10 runs. Jordan Campbell was one of the many stars of this game, going 1 for 2 with 3 runs, 2 walks, a stolen base, and an RBI. His brother, Jared Campbell, also got a home run and finished 2 for 3 with 4 RBIs, a walk, and a sacrifice bunt. Other notable players were Luis Hernandez, who drove a pair of runs in the 4th inning to bring the score to 6-1, and Joathan Rivera, who did not give up an earned run in a complete game win. The team finished the game with a score of 10-1 the next day. The team competed against Brescia for the final team this time, winning with a score of 17-6. In the first inning, it seemed like Brescia was in stride. However, the Point Park offense responded and quickly shut them down. By the second inning, the score was 6-3 Point Park, and at the end of the third, they were up 10-3. The Pioneers just continued to build on top of that and carried the game from that point on. They sealed the victory with a score of 17-6. Their next game is Thursday the 10th at Oberlin College, where we're hoping they can keep their winning streak alive. Switching things up, now we'll go to the Point Park women's softball team, who spent their spring break down in Florida, where they faced both Cleary University and the University of Michigan Dearborn twice. The first game against Cleary University was held on Wednesday, where the team lost 1-0. The pitchers on both teams were the stars of this game, with Point Park's Jada Simons getting 7 hits in all 7 innings. Ultimately, it wasn't enough to pull out a win. Moving on to later in the day, the Pioneers played the University of Michigan Dearborn, where they won this game with a score of 4-1. The Pioneers got all of their scores in the first 5 innings of the game. Sydney Reese and Jody Frontino got things rolling for the Pioneers when they were both walked and set up 3 big runs that got them the 4-1 lead. The Pioneers were able to hold the lead for the rest of the game and finish their first day of games with 1 win and 1 loss. The next day, the Pioneers ladies faced the same 2 teams. University of Michigan Dearborn got the revenge they were looking for and pulled out a 4-1 lead over the Pioneers. By the 4th inning, the teams were tied at 1-1. Unfortunately, the Wolverines controlled the remainder of the game and the Pioneers weren't able to get their stride back. On to later in the day, the Pioneers faced Cleary University and this time got the results they were looking for. The 5th inning was huge for the girls as they got 4 runs to break the 2-2 tie. Sydney Reese had a 2-run homer that got the girls another 2 points to bring the score to 4-2. Finally, Carissa Skeegers and Alex Bondi tied things up for the Pioneers, who ended their trip in Florida with a 6-2 victory. The Pioneers softball team doesn't have another game until the 15th, where they will be traveling to Canton, Ohio to face Malone University. We wish the best of luck to our team and hope they can get a winning streak going in Ohio. Back to you, Nat.
Thanks, Hannah. Up next, we hear from John Mayer about the Penguins and what the Steelers are looking at in the Combine and in free agency. The Penguins had a couple games this past week, and the Steelers are ready to start making moves as the NFL Combine concludes. To update us on that, we send it over to John Mayer. John?
Thanks, Nat. The NFL offseason is really starting to heat up. The NFL Combine just came to a conclusion, and plenty of prospects put themselves on the map with impressive performances. One of these prospects includes Pittsburgh's own Kenny Pickett, as his amazing athleticism was on full display when he ran a 4.73 during the 40-yard dash and wowed scouts by making dazzling throw after dazzling throw. Despite Kenny's impressive performance, the story around Kenny was all about his hand size, which measured in at 8.5 inches, far below the average for an NFL quarterback. Could Kenny stay in Pittsburgh? It's a possibility, as the Steelers are exploring all options to fill the massive void left by future Hall of Famer Ben Roethlisberger's retirement at the quarterback position, according to General Manager Kevin Colbert. These options include other notable draft prospects, such as Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, and Matt Corral, and free agent quarterbacks the Steelers have been linked to are Mitchell Trubisky, Jameis Winston, and Teddy Bridgewater, according to Pro Football Network's Tony Pauline. The Steelers are also looking to add help on the offensive line, and they have been linked to free agent Pro Bowl linemen Ryan Jensen and Laken Tomlinson, per ESPN. The Steelers have some leeway to make some big signings in free agency if they choose, entering the offseason with over $28 million in cap space, which is currently 10th in the NFL and the most cap room the franchise has had in years. Now, on to Penguins hockey, where the Penguins have been on fire recently, picking up points in each of their last 4 games. They shut out the Rangers 1-0 on Saturday behind a stellar effort from Tristan Jarry and a shorthanded goal from Evgeny Malkin, which ended up being the only goal of the contest. The Pens then came back from a 2-1 deficit against the Blue Jackets on Sunday, prevailing 3-2 as backup goaltender Casey DeSmith came through big for the Pens, stopping 32 of 34 shots. The Pens then defeated the defending Stanley Cup champion Lightning on the road, picking up a dominant win over the Bolts by a score of 5-1. Next up for the Pens was a battle with the top team in the Metropolitan Division, the Carolina Hurricanes. And unfortunately, this is where the Penguins' 3-game winning streak came to an end, falling to the division-leading Canes by a score of 3-2 in OT, picking up a point in the process despite the loss. The Penguins are currently tied for second in the Metro Division with the Rangers with 77 points and have huge games coming up against the Florida Panthers tonight, the Vegas Golden Knights Friday night, and a huge rematch against the division-leading Carolina Hurricanes on Sunday at the Paint Bucket.
Thanks, John. Now let's hear from Jacob Kubik on all things national. Jacob?
The franchise tag deadline is looming, so that means news has been breaking all day out of the NFL with 2 blockbuster deals thus far. First, the Green Bay Packers announced that back-to-back league MVP Aaron Rodgers will be returning to Green Bay with the 4-year, $200 million deal, making him the highest-paid quarterback in NFL history. After that news broke, it was announced that Seattle Seahawks are trading Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos, pending Wilson's approval. Also making news out of the NFL over the past 24 hours, Atlanta Falcons wide receiver Calvin Ridley had been suspended for the 2022 season after it was determined he was gambling on his own team, which goes against league policy. Ridley confirmed in a tweet, quote, "I do not have a gambling problem." The league stated according to early evidence that the gambling did not compromise the game in any way. On Saturday night, the battle for North Carolina in college basketball was accompanied with one last ride for the winningest head coach in college basketball history. 42 years at Duke University for head coach Mike Krzyzewski came full circle with one final game at Cameron Indoor Stadium against the North Carolina Tar Heels. 80 previous players and countless celebrities were in attendance, and the game certainly did not disappoint. Both teams came out firing, putting up a combined 80 points for the first half, with Duke holding a 2-point lead at the half. North Carolina, however, came out in the second half and decided to spoil the party, dropping 55 points in the second half, winning the battle by a final score of 94-81. In NHL news, the league decided to rebrand the logo for the Stanley Cup playoffs. The picture of the cup shows the engravings on the cup, making it the most realistic picture of the cup the league has ever used in a logo. The font of the words below the cup is called Windsor Sands, named after the Montreal Windsor Hotel, where the league was founded in 1917. Regular season play is heating up currently, and playoffs are scheduled to begin in May. Back to you, Nat.
Thanks, Jacob. Coming up next, we talk about upcoming free agency buzz for the NFL and the case of the week.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, and welcome back to Newsnight. Most of the student body of the Pittsburgh Public School.
Some of the United States allies.
Thursday, the FBI was seen raiding.
Let's get started with today's forecast.
Today's high will only reach about 31 degrees.
It's looking a little cooler than we've seen in the past few weeks.
All this and more
All this and more
All this and more coming up on Newsnight.
coming up on Newsnight.
coming up on Newsnight.
Welcome back. This week we're talking about the wild NFL free agency possibilities and what we think will come from it. I'm joined with Jacob, Joey, and John, and we're about to hear what they think about everything. So starting off, how do we feel about the Seahawks trading Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos? Jacob?
So the entire trade was Denver receives Russell Wilson and a 4th-round pick from Seattle in exchange for quarterback Drew Lock, tight end Noah Fant, defensive lineman Shelby Harris, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a 5th-round pick. Right now, I didn't see a year that the draft picks are going to be, whether it'll be this year or next year or somewhere down the line. But personally, I think that getting rid of Russell Wilson was a little bit of a shock whenever I first saw it. But then whenever I saw everything that Seattle was getting in it, like from this pick, I really thought that Seattle kind of won the trade, because with 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks, you can really do a lot of damage. And Denver seems like they're really putting a lot of faith in Russell to kind of lead them to a conference championship and definitely a Super Bowl championship in one of the hardest divisions in the league, with Kansas City, Oakland, Vegas, and the Chargers as well. So, in my eyes, I think this is like a go for broke kind of trade here.
Honestly, I think the Broncos won this deal. I feel like obviously they gave up a lot. I know Seattle doesn't have a first-round pick this year. Maybe I know Denver has the 9th overall pick, so I think that might be up for Seattle for maybe to grab a quarterback. But I think Denver won. They were 7-10 this year. They're a young team. I honestly think the quarterback was the piece they need. And I mean, like you said, they're in a tough division. Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr, Justin Herbert. They're 4 Pro Bowl quarterbacks in the division now. So I think really the quarterback was the main piece that the Broncos needed, and maybe they can win a couple more games this year to get them into the playoffs.
Listen, I really think this trade works out perfectly for both sides. The Seahawks really needed this deal. They gave up a ton of picks for Jamal Adams. We obviously know how that worked out. Didn't work out well. So they replenished their draft capital. They got 3 really Drew Lock. Yeah, he has potential. He has potential, which is a lot for a quarterback. Getting him back, he has potential to be something. Then you get Noah Fant, a former first-round pick. And then you get Shelby Harris, a veteran. So 3 players replenishing their draft capital. Great deal for Seattle. And it was just as good for Denver, because as we just said, 3 Pro Bowl quarterbacks. Herbert, Carr, Mahomes. They had to get a guy to compete with them. So adding Wilson to the mix, and Von Miller's teasing a comeback, they have a solid team. They have Justin Simmons, Bradley Chubb, Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah.
They have some studs on that team. So getting Wilson in there, he could possibly take them to the next level, depending on how he recovers from his injury. So for Denver, huge pickup. Seattle, huge as well, replenishing their draft capital, kickstarting this rebuild. So I really think this trade worked out for both sides.
I also agree, just because with all the quarterbacks being so good in that division, I think it'll be perfect for the Broncos that they have them. We're going to move on to Aaron Rodgers staying in Green Bay. Jacob.
I think it's an interesting deal. I expected him to re-sign with Green Bay. I didn't think that he was going to leave, or if he was, it was going to be a big trade like how Russell Wilson's was. But I'm surprised to see that it was for 4 years. I'm not surprised to see how much it was for. But I think like after Davante Adams got franchise tagged, it just leaves a lot of questions like with cap space. I'm happy for the Packers that they kept him because he's obviously a great quarterback and has performed the last 2 years. But it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the pieces fall now that they actually kept Rodgers.
I mean, you brought up a good point with all their cap space. They just gave Aaron Rodgers $200 million for 4 years. That's a lot. And they're franchise tagging Davante Adams, like you said. I think that's around $18 million.
Something like that.
So,
yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of money, and they have a lot of contracts that they need to deal with on the defensive side of the ball.
Yep.
So I don't really know how that's going to work. I'm just so glad he's not coming to Pittsburgh. All these people saying Aaron Rodgers to Pittsburgh, Aaron Rodgers to Pittsburgh. That would be great. Honestly, he's old. He's probably only going to play for like a couple more years, so it would have been absolutely pointless for us to waste however many draft picks on Aaron Rodgers or players to get him for 2 years when we could get someone out of the draft like Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
According to Rodgers himself, that 4-year, $200 million contract is actually not true. He said it himself on Twitter. So maybe he's taking a team-friendly deal to get Davante back on the team. But for the Packers, they really need to take that another playoff one-and-done exit. They have to make the Super Bowl. Back-to-back MVP, the best receiver in the league, Davante Adams. They have to take that next step. So they have to add the pieces in the draft, and they just have to keep adding to that team because even with Rodgers and Adams, it's not enough to get them over the hump. And as you said before, if Rodgers coming to Pittsburgh, he was linked to coming to the Steelers. I'm glad the Steelers did not give up any draft capital. I'm glad they didn't give up any players for Rodgers because he's 38. And let's be honest, he's a prima donna. He could retire. If it didn't work out with the Steelers, our offensive line is a wreck. He could have retired, and we could have gave up all our future capital. So I'm glad we didn't make a trade for him. It only takes one pick to get that guy. We saw with Ben in 2004. We've seen it with countless other teams, Lamar, Burrow, Mahomes. It only takes one pick to land him. So I'm looking for the Steelers to find that guy in the draft this year, whether it's Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, Matt Corral, someone out of this draft class. The Steelers are going to have to add to the quarterback room, and I'm glad it's not Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I definitely did not see Aaron Rodgers playing for the Steelers whatsoever. I think he's good with Green Bay.
Yeah.
Any last-minute thoughts?
Whoever says Jameis Winston to the Steelers, don't ever talk to me. I don't think that's a good move.
Well, you heard Joey.
I mean, I don't know. He went 5-2 as a starter this year. He came to New Orleans. He got out of Tampa's system. He learned under Drew Brees and Sean Payton. He looked like a different player before he tore his ACL.
That's the only thing I'm worried about. Jameis Winston really likes to get injured. He is a good quarterback, but I just don't know how I feel about him getting injured all the time.
Listen, better than Mason Rudolph. That's all I'm going to say.
He has his good days and he has his bad days, Jameis Winston.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Be sure to join us next week at the same Pioneer time, the same Pioneer channel, and the same Pioneer sideline. I have nothing to say about that.